The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
On the Alldus podcast, I'm joined by Paul Collins, Regional Information Security Officer for Europe at US Bank, with over 20 years of experience in information security and a long track record of leading security strategy in financial services. Paul is someone who's seen the cybersecurity landscape evolve from the back office to the boardroom. And in this conversation, we're going to explore what it's really like to secure a global bank, the biggest threats facing financial institutions in Ireland and Europe, and what companies, as well as individuals, should be doing differently when it comes to security. Paul, thanks very much for joining us on the show today.
Not at all, it's great to be here.
We were just kind of saying it downstairs. 35 years, blinking an eye.
It's like Stone Age. So I was sharing some of the articles from the 1990s and the hard disks moving to RAID and all the stuff that we dealt with. And then the other thing, people have never seen a fax before. One of the things we used to do, we worked with Guinness back in the day, and we used to send out their invoices to all the pubs in Ireland, and they went out via fax. So 11,000 faxes each month with Guinness's invoices.
And you'd kind of been on kind of help desk, you'd kind of Ethernet cables, literally getting hands dirty, you've kind of seen it all.
Well, I started, my degree is electronic engineering, so literally from soldering cables all the way up. And hardware, software, one of the jobs we were on was a HP printer problem. And I took it apart and figured out what was wrong. It was a fuser unit. HP engineer came in and he couldn't put it back together because it had to be taken apart a certain way. So he left me the fuser unit, put it back together, worked fine.
How do you, in the world that you're in now, where you're probably thinking back to all the different types of milestones that are happening, and we're in such a kind of a incredibly fast-paced kind of world, but I'm guessing everything that you've been kind of doing is kind of built to this moment, right?
It's an evolving landscape, and I mean the threats and then the opportunities as well are changing constantly. I mean, we didn't have social media back in the day, but like in college we used to ping each other on Telnet. Like there was a chat system within the college network at the time. So just because we didn't have Facebook or I'm aging myself there, we didn't have whatever it is, TikTok or Insta. There were ways people exchange information. We had bulletin board services. Again, I'm really aging myself, but the intent to share and communicate has always been there. And then the counterpoint is there's always someone trying to tweak the system and trying to compromise it.
And how did you get into cyber?
I was always curious. I was always, particularly in college, I always wanted to know how things work. And that's what I'm finding. A lot of the people who are long-time information security people, that's the most common trait I'm finding, curiosity. And it basically got to the stage where the internet, again, it was never built for security. It was never built to be secure. It was built to be resilient. The internet was built in the 1960s to withstand nuclear warfare. So that if one or two cities were wiped out, that the network would just route around them. So bizarrely as it was. So when email communication came in and people were using it for business, they realized, jeepers, this is really insecure. People can fake emails. Phishing emails were really easy to do. They still are if you know what you're doing. So we had to build security around it. And then people realized, well, okay, I'm connected to the internet, but I can see all these other guys connected to the internet. And if I want to go in and connect into their networks, they might have a default password I can use, or they might have an easy password I can guess. So it just evolved from there, where the more people started to use electronic networking, the more the need and the demand came for security. So firewalls were the first one. Literally, if you're connected to the internet, put this in between you and the internet, stop the nasty stuff coming in and stop, make sure what you're going out is able to go out and it's got a proper amount of bandwidth and stuff available to it.
For most people in Ireland anyway, they may not know much about US Bank, but we're a pretty sizable company in terms of its reach and the amount of people that work there. Tell us a little bit about that and also some of the work that you're doing day to day.
Sure. So we are the 5th largest bank in the US, and most people in Europe have never heard of us. I was at a conference there last year and I had a badge that said Paul Collins US Bank, and someone thought I was being covert and trying to hide. I said, which US Bank? Is it Bank of America? Is it Citi? So they're based in Minneapolis as the headquarters, Midwest. I travel to Cincinnati and Minneapolis a couple of times a year. In Europe, the main business lines are payment processing. So if you've bought fuel in Circle K or you bought anything on air, in flight on Ryanair, and if you look at the back of your receipt, you see the name Elavon. Elavon is a US bank brand in Europe. So I work with Elavon, I work with some of the fund services teams in Europe, basically to help them make sure that their businesses are secure. And we also have, from a regulation perspective, although we have a fantastic, very large team in the US, we have to have someone physically on the ground here that the regulators, the auditors can come to.
When we think about financial services and banks, what type of cybersecurity issues are more predominantly focused on them?
It's ultimately, and it's the same, it has been the same forever, it's about money. So banks have money, so people want your money. So there's various different ways they'll try that. The most common attack in the past has been DDoS, distributed denial of service, where essentially an organization will try to shut down your web page, and then they charge you money to get it open back up again. So it's ransom. It's holding you to ransom. The other one we've seen quite a lot is they try to get into your network. If they find a foothold, they encrypt a load of your files. And they say, if you want to get your files back, again, you got to pay us a ransom. What the even sneakier guys have been doing more recently is they're copying your files as well as encrypting them. So they say, yeah, we give you access to your files, but we've got copies, and we're going to release them on the internet if you don't give us another ransom. So it's, and this is not just unique to financial services. Every organization that's connected to the internet has similar sort of risks. What we're seeing is larger banks have now got such strong security that the threat actors are probing, going, oh, look, we're going to waste our time banging against this wall. They're going to suppliers instead. So if you've got a supplier as a financial services company, and if they go down and you go down, your customers are impacted, then that's something that has a direct impact on you. And they're not the same sort of organization, don't have the same security budgets, same resources. So that's what we're seeing now, a lot of attacks on third parties, on suppliers, and a lot of attacks on open source software. So we've got hundreds, thousands of developers who are using software available from the internet, and we're seeing threat actors poisoning that software with a view to getting their malicious code inserted into your organization, which they can then use to do other things. So they're going after, it's always, they find the weakest link, the easiest approach, and they'll go after that. If the banks are too strong, they'll go after bank suppliers. And it's in the interest then of the banks, financial services companies, to work with our key suppliers to make sure that we're all working together to get a more resilient environment. There's a very big piece of regulation that came in early last year called DORA, Digital Operation Resilience Act. And the main purpose of it is to make customer service for financial service more resilient, more available. That's what we're all trying to do anyway. This just regulates it. And that's driving a lot of considerations around resilience, and information security is part of that. So it's just, again, another factor that's driving. The regulation side does drive a lot of this.
Yeah. Has there been anything that's been kind of surprising you about how people can underestimate the importance of suppliers and their security?
100%. I mean, and we've got situations where we have a very strong third-party onboarding program where we ask suppliers lots of questions, and we go through a lot of diligence. We run our own network scans, and we check as much as we can. And it's a cooperative thing. It's not we're not doing this behind anyone's back. But we still find that there are issues there that we can see, and the suppliers might not even be aware of themselves.
Yeah.
We find a situation where we've got a supplier, it looks like a really small company, and they're doing a few bits and pieces for this business line over here, and suddenly they have an issue or an impact, and it might not be security related, and then we realize actually there's a particular function that relies so heavily on them that we need to focus and bring them back up and get them back up and running quite quickly. So this is what we're hearing across the industry as well, is that people don't fully understand who their critical suppliers are.
Yeah.
And it's a key part of DORA, is knowing who these key people. The Amazons, the Microsofts, we know who they are. But it's the other smaller suppliers who, they're critical to your business. And it can be back at the end of the day, a JCB going through 2 fiber optic lines could take you down. It doesn't need to be a super hacker somewhere. There's still, the basic issues still happen.
Is there anything that's, particularly in the last 12 to 18 months, that's evolved, that's now kind of changed the conversation or the landscape cyber now? Some AI kind of models, I won't mention their names, but they're in the news for different reasons. They look like they're more aggressive in terms of how they can find 0-day issues. You've also got the kind of, how do you now support responses and defenses against them?
Sure.
Is this kind of changed the conversation, the narratives around the board, where they're leaning in a little bit more?
Absolutely, 100%. And pretty much if something reaches mainstream media, I'm going to get questions from senior management and the board. And, once the BBC have something reporting, I'm going to get questions on it. And that's happening at the moment with what's called frontier AI. So these new AI models. The way it's being presented to the wider industry is that these models can detect vulnerabilities more quickly, but can also be used to attack against those vulnerabilities. Or, we in the past, you'd be concerned about the critical vulnerabilities, the really big issues that could take you down. Now there's concern that the AI models can string together 5 or 6 low-level vulnerabilities and somehow build an attack around them. So what it has definitely done, regardless of hype or anything else, it's definitely lowered the bar for people who want to do nefarious things, who want to get into cyber attacks. They can download these models themselves, and it's speeding up and increasing the volume of attacks. But this is something we've seen over the past couple of years. AI models have existed and have evolved over the past 18 months anyway, and are being used, and not just by threat actors. So security researchers use AI models to detect vulnerabilities themselves. If you're doing a security degree course, you get extra credit if you find a 0-day vulnerability. So they're using, and AI is the most common way they use that. It's just a tool that goes out and scans for stuff.
At Alldus, we're helping companies hire professionals in the field of cybersecurity and AI on permanent and contract. And our differentiator is we're helping companies hire people that we really trust. And we build that trust through referrals. Over 85% of the people that we place into roles on contract or permanent are through referrals of people we know who recommend them. This is really important, particularly in the world of cyber, where you want to have professionals who are really good at their job, who are trusted, and they can come in and add value to your business. On contract, we've got some of the most niche skills available for people to hire, but also we're introducing virtual CISOs. CISOs that can come in and work in your business between 1, 2, 3, 4 days a month, if not a little bit more. If you're interested in finding out a little bit more about the services Alldus provide, please feel free to get in touch. Now back to the show. What should companies do around their people, their processes, their platforms to become more vigilant, to start to make a step up now?
It's the basic stuff, and again, there are lots of really cool technologies in the background, but the basic issues still remain. It's education and training. We do a lot of phishing testing, and we get criticism from people that we're trying to embarrass them or make them feel small by being very sneaky. But all of the phishing tests we use are based on stuff we've seen in real life, which are getting harder to detect. The counterpoint, and this is a challenge I have outside work, is it used to be very easy for me. I could go to my family or friends and say, look, if you keep an eye out for this and watch for this, you'll be fine. Look out for this dodgy stuff, and if you don't go near that, you'll be fine. And this is the stuff that you should look for.
Yeah.
We're now finding, I'm not sure if you've ever seen it, but there's a new feature that came in by ComReg last year, where if a company hasn't registered correctly with ComReg and they send out a text message, it flags on your phone under the sender likely scam, right? You would not believe the number of government agencies, enterprise organizations who I've received text messages from as likely scam. Now, I've enough background and experience to validate whether it is a scam or not, but this is terrifying people. And so the bad guys are getting better at creating realistic looking stuff, and the good guys, for want of a better word, are getting poorer about their hygiene.
It's so interesting because my 6-year-old keeps going, that's a scam.
Yeah.
Like he's using that terminology. My other kids never used that terminology when they were a kid, and I certainly didn't talk about scams when I was younger, but it does become more into the mainstream.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not just about money. It could be, trying to get someone's ID so you can pretend to be them and do silly stuff on social media. It might not be malicious. We did enough pranks back in the day with, getting into people's accounts and sending off messages to each other. It was never particularly malicious or nefarious, but and that's something, again, there's always been 2 flavors of hackers, the black hats and the white hats, and it's back to the westerns, the old westerns. You could tell the baddies because they had black hats and the goodies had white hats. The white hats are called the ethical hackers, and they were the people who would probe stuff to see what was out there and then disclose it. I was at a presentation in Black Hat, it's a very big hacker conference last year, and somebody had figured out how to crack an Amazon account by using a fake audiobook on a Kindle. They created an audiobook file that allowed you full access to an Amazon account. Now, they didn't release that. They went to Amazon and said, we found this and you should probably fix it. And they worked with Amazon to get that fixed. So that's the ethical hacking side, the white hat. And the black hat's basically just trying to break things either for fun or for profit.
I saw a post from Neil Mullen yesterday in HSC, and he kind of articulated, how these people are just going to work, big organization, they've got away days, holidays, the backpack, they've got the merch. It's literally like that's their business, but it just turns into they're like non-ethical hackers.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's teams of ethical hackers who we use to pretend to be attackers. So we pay organizations and we use organizations to attack us as if they are these latest threat actors, using very realistic, very up-to-date attack methods to see how we would deal with an attack of these different types. And then the bad guys are doing, as I said, they've got corporations, they've got pension plans, they have, all this kind of stuff.
It's crazy when you think of them going away on their away days, talking about their vision, their values, about what,
The money is crazy.
Yeah.
There's a team of threat actors called Scattered Spider. They all have bizarre names. And most of them are in their 17, 18, 19, late teens, early 20s. Quite a few have been arrested. They're still active. And they've been attributed to ransoms of up to $160 million over the past 3 or 4 years. This is big money. This isn't cheap change.
Yeah, it's incredible. We talk about friction and having that balance between this really kind of nice customer and staff experience and then not being kind of seen as the computer says no, but you're kind of walking through those kind of friction lists. What does that look like day to day in reality?
It's a constant change, a constant challenge, because every time we see a new threat, we've got to counteract it. We've got to put some control in place. And occasionally, or more frequently, depending on the control, that will have some impact. It'll slow something down. It'll, impact the customer experience, or just make things more difficult or more challenging for people. And it could be as trivial as we don't like the company wallpaper, I'm not allowed to change it, to I can't actually run this command anymore and it's critical for my day-to-day business. So what we try to develop within the security team, open patterns of communication and be accessible. Instead of being in an ivory tower somewhere, it's just throwing out security policies. We're trying to engage with the business and with customer-facing people and say, look, what's the stuff that's getting in the way?
Yeah.
And how can we make it easier?
Yeah.
We have to do all this stuff. There's security, particularly for financial services, there's a cost to doing business from a regulatory perspective, from just, once you're in this business, there's certain things you have to have at a minimum level. And then there's the stuff to go beyond that, extra enhancements or stuff that will make your life easier. Automation. So again, AI is a bad guy. It also can be used for automation and for reducing a lot of manual overhead and speeding up routine tasks.
So you're working through that friction list, you're being more present, you're being more visible, and then people can actually then start to lean in more to yourself and you kind of have that more transparency as well. What is it like working within kind of a kind of global organization where you're catching up with people, 80,000 people in the organization, 800 people in the world of security? How do you stay on top of so many different types of things? Talk about having those core relationships with kind of key leaders to make sure that you're present in the world where change is constant.
Well, I'm part of the leadership team in US Bank for information security. There are 8 of us currently. I speak to that team every day, every single day. And those 30-minute calls with the team where we all share, now that could be a 5-minute call, it could be a 30-minute call. It's never more than 30 minutes, but it's what are you dealing with? What are you seeing? What have you heard? What's coming in? And that team covers all the 800 people in information security and also the international threats, all the stuff that we're seeing. What's interesting, for the definition of interesting, excuse me, we're not seeing different threats in the US or Europe or Asia. The same threat actors are just being typically opportunistic. They're running scans on the entire internet to see what they can find. We haven't seen anything particularly targeting Ireland from a European perspective. We're obviously all the industry's monitoring closely in relation to conflicts in Ukraine and Iran, but we're not, at the moment anyway, we haven't seen any specific threats on Europe in relation to what's going on there. So that's just another area that, the geopolitical landscape is another area that drives our threat analysis stuff. But the day-to-day stuff, where the big value is, at least in our organization, is FaceTime. So I stand in front of committees on a monthly basis, I stand in front of boards on a quarterly basis, and give them the opportunity to ask questions. Usually I know in advance, as I said, it's at BBC, I know what's coming. We anticipate and we share information before it comes to those meetings. Obviously, we don't just wait to get up there. And then we exchange information. I go to I have a very wide network within the bank. People come to me if they have a problem, and I try to help them. We get stuff like, I'm trying to send an email and it doesn't work, and it's Thanksgiving, so all the US staff are on holiday. It's always something, or it's Christmas Eve, or it's it's something
They're
else.
so well thought out and so well intentioned.
Exactly, and it's always the worst possible time. Yeah. So what I try to do is, again, I try to facilitate. I try to know the processes. It's such a large organization that trying to keep on top of all the different change processes can be a challenge.
Yeah.
So again, we're trying to educate and inform. and remind people. So there's no point me going back and say, well, I told you that 3 years ago, because people aren't going to remember. So I'll go back and dig out the information from 3 years ago. Yes, this still works. Okay, this is how we do it. And it's an education. It has to be a cooperative, it has to be a support thing, because otherwise it's not effective. We can't just say no.
With the next generation coming through, if you read an awful lot of the press and you talk to people, it's become more challenging for graduates to kind of get more meaningful roles. AI is playing a role in that, good and bad. What advice would you offer to the next generation coming in who want to get into the landscape of cyber as their career?
It's really tricky, and it's the same challenge as it was when I started my career. You need to have experience or you need to have skills, and it's difficult to demonstrate. It's difficult to get a foot in the door. I had a degree in electronic engineering and managed to get a job. I got work experience in DCU, which again, by the time I graduated, I had practical experience working in an IT environment, which is invaluable. And I think that's where the real value is. If you can manage to get an internship, is very common in the US, not so much here. But we are seeing people coming in for a couple of weeks doing, work experience engagement, whether it's transition year or while they're in college as well. And it's just to get that exposure to a corporate environment and understand how it works, regardless of the technology side.
Yeah.
Certification in information security, there are so many different certifications you can get. They all require time, effort, and money. I only have one official certification. I'm a certified ethical hacker. There are far more people in the company more certified and more qualified theoretically than I am. But it's, again, trying to balance the certification against the experience. But it's difficult, it's difficult for me to articulate in a 2-page CV my experience versus, having 23 pieces of certification behind you.
Yeah. Paul Collins, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today.
Not at all. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.